Hey everyone, my name's Erin. I'm a therapist, and I'm going to start this video by giving you an experience that I think most people can relate to. So this is like the experience of losing a valuable object, losing a thing, and the experience we have when we go on the quest to find the thing. First, we look in predictable places. So the places that you would normally think, this is where I usually put the thing. And then we look in places where maybe we don't normally put things. So the fridge, in that random cabinet, in the drawer. Meanwhile, we become more and more overwhelmed when we can't find the thing. And as the more overwhelmed we get, also the more we start to probably shame ourselves. So what's wrong with you? How did you lose the thing? You need the thing. Why does this always happen? Why can't you be trusted with nice things or, to keep track of your things? Long and the short of it is we get really ratcheted up, we get really overwhelmed, and we're not able to find the thing. We need to abandon the mission because life awaits and life calls. So we have other responsibilities we need to attend to. Maybe you need to go pick up your kids. Maybe you need to resume a work project, but long and short, abandoning the quest. And then maybe it's a few hours later, maybe it's a few days later or weeks, when you're participating in the moment here and now, when your nervous system has calmed down, you receive this cue to revisit a place where you had definitely looked for the thing. And lo and behold, there it is. This is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that when you were fully in the present moment, when your nervous system was calm, you were able to access intelligence that you needed to resource yourself with a need. In this video, we're going to talk about what are some of the practices that we can engage in for maintenance purposes. In future videos, I'll talk about specifically how do we channel and how do we create space for higher self with regards to issues in our lives and also co-creating with higher self. But in this video, we're going to talk about maintenance practices for really getting in the range of hearing higher self and also learning to trust higher self. So what are some of the practices that help us to access this higher level thinking and to trust the guidance? So I'm going to start this video by talking to you about Lisa Miller's Awakened Brain. We're going to revisit it. I've talked about this in other videos, but I think it's important to have a baseline level of understanding of this and to kind of substantiate what I'm talking about when I will talk about present moment awareness practices that are really helpful to us, and also the importance of play, which sets us up to trust higher self, which is very cool. And we'll talk about that. So to revisit Lisa Miller's Awakened Brain, Lisa Miller is a professor at Columbia University. She has done many sort of studies now on the neurological pathways in our brain. And what she's come to discover is that we have two sets of neurological pathways that, when fired, allow us to access certain levels of intelligence and to resource certain needs that we have. So on the one hand, we have the awakened awareness, and I want you to think about this as a Venn diagram, okay? We have the awakened awareness on the left side, and awakened awareness neural pathways, when fired, allow us to be receptive to intelligent information coming in, okay, in the present moment. So we receive these cues from being calm, so we can access them by submitting to life, being in the moment. So being in awakened awareness states, just like I told you when you're finding the thing, it requires you to actually soothe your nervous system. So all the practices that I gave you leading up to this point about embracing and really helping you to calm your nervous system are really sort of the foundational practices that you need in order to access this sort of awakened awareness state. Okay, so in awakened awareness states, we remain open to life. We remain submissive to life as it is and able to take in information, outside information. Now, when we're in achievement awareness states, which is the right-hand side of the Venn diagram, we're able to assert power and control and direct life energy. Okay, so in our culture, we are in achieving awareness states much of the time because we're in a hustle culture. So in this video, I'm really going to try to even out the scale here when I give you awakened awareness practices, things that are going to help you to cultivate this more so that we can toggle more easily, which I'm going to get into in a second, but also that we can remain open to insights, to general insights and to specific insights when it comes to our life story and resourcing ourselves with what we need. So what do I mean by the toggle? So when we toggle back and forth between awakened awareness states and achieving awareness states, what Lisa Miller has found is that we create a third perceptual frame, which she calls quest. When we are in questing awareness states, this is what I really call sort of higher self. When we're in questing awareness states, we find that our life story tends to dovetail with the life story, the story of life outside of us. Okay, so we get cues, insights. We're led on sort of this scavenger hunt of need. We're able to resource ourselves with our needs in new, novel, and innovative ways. And we're able to resource and leverage the resources in our environment. Okay, so we essentially are able to co-create with life when we are in questing awareness states. You might think of this as similar to flow states. Positive psychologists call, sort of questing awareness states flow states, where people feel really in sync with life here and now. They feel kind of untouchable. We are used to associating this with sort of heightened creative states, which I'll talk about today. But just know I'm going to use this sort of model as I give you some practices to, again, substantiate what it is that I am talking about with regards to resourcing ourselves with higher self and also developing confidence in our ability to play with higher self. So in our ability to toggle back and forth between achieving and awaken awareness and to access the answers to the questions we need. Okay, so the first set of practices that I'm going to give you are really meant to help you sort of foster greater comfort with awakened awareness states. As I shared with you a moment ago, we live in a culture where being in awakened awareness states is not necessarily encouraged or supported. We live in a hustle culture here in the US, so it's better, faster, more. That means we are in achievement awareness states much of the time. We are highly outcome driven. And as a result of this, oftentimes we lose our connection to the present moment. So in order to sort of balance the scale, if we want to, again, access higher level thinking, we've got to get achievement awareness online. Like we need to start firing these pathways more. And particularly if we want to experience this questing awareness state, then we need to balance out the scale so that being able to toggle becomes possible, because for a lot of people, it's hard to do that. It's hard to have a desire or intend to create change in a certain area of your life and also be able to stay present while you're implementing change or while you're working towards something. Okay, a lot of times we get locked into the doing and we miss the cues, we miss the insights. So I'm not trying to say here or convert people to thinking that, you can't get things done when you're in achievement awareness states, but getting things done effectively and creating new outcomes in our lives comes from being able to access awakened awareness as well. Okay, because a lot of times when we're in achievement awareness states, we are creating more and more of the same. When we are in awakened awareness states, we're open to the moment here and now, which means we're able to resource new and novel answers here and now. So what kind of practices help us to be in sort of this awakened awareness state? So these practices that I'm going to give you really have to do with exteroception. So I did a whole video on interoception, which is our internal sensations. Exteroception has to do with our external sensations. So sight, taste, sound, smell, all that good stuff. It's our sensory experience that allows us to ground in the moment. Okay, when you think of the last time that you were really at peace, for the most part, you probably felt like you were really connected to the moment. Maybe you were watching your kids play, or maybe you were involved in a creative pursuit where you were just focused on the thing itself. You were present. When we are present, we lose time consciousness, which means if you were to go back to my prior videos, it means that we're not in this state of chasing or bracing, of achieving awareness where we are anticipating a fall, okay? Where we're anticipating something bad happening or needing to protect or defend ourselves, which means we can open more safely to the moment. If we're in a time consciousness mentality, if we are worrying about the thing we didn't do, or if we are worrying about the thing that we need to do, it becomes really difficult to access that higher level of thinking. So when we are fully immersed in our sensory experience, we lose time consciousness, which is sort of pivotal to opening to life. Okay. So what are some of the practices that help us to be present? Meditation and mindfulness. I know this is a really popular one that people have been talking about for a while. I'm going to give you a little bit of my experience, meditation and mindfulness, some suggestions. We'll also get into some other practices, but let's start with, for those of you who don't know a lot about it, let's start with what is meditation, what is mindfulness, and how does it help us? So meditation is really the formalized practice of sitting down and training your brain to come back to the present moment. I will tell clients it's sort of like lifting weights. You don't need to be not thinking when you are meditating, but what you're doing is you're sort of training, you're developing these mental muscles, you're strengthening mental muscles to come back to the present moment by using an anchoring point. So in some traditions, the anchoring point is a mantra. So you would sit and you would repeat a mantra to yourself. In some practices, there's a specific sensory anchoring point. So this is a lot easier for me to experience with you than it is for me to explain with you. So I'm going to give you a short meditation right now to do with me. It's an auditory meditation, and I invite you to do it with me right here and now and get a sense of what I'm talking about. So I want you to take a deep breath, and for the next few moments, I just want you to focus on identifying sounds in the room you're in. So without judgment, without, interpretation, just notice how many sounds you can identify, the different textures, the different sounds. And then I want you to shift your attention to sounds outside of this room. So maybe that sounds outside. Maybe you can hear birds chirping or a car or the breeze, but just noticing. Okay, now I want you to bring your attention back in. So the activity we just did was an auditory meditation. And it was not a meditation like transcendental meditation where you're sitting and you're closing your eyes and you have a mantra, which I'll get into. It's a meditation that uses a sensory experience as an anchoring point to the moment, okay? In this case, we used sound. And if you did this with me, hopefully you felt a sense of calm. Why? Because again, you lost your time consciousness for a minute. You were just focused on what was going on in this moment, meaning your achievement, awareness, neural pathways were fired, okay? I will oftentimes tell clients to do this if they're waiting for something, right? We usually get agitated when we're like in waiting rooms or something's taking a long time. I'll encourage clients to practice this auditory meditation because I think it's a great one. But in general, I feel like this is it's an easy one to practice, and it's really effective. So aside from an auditory meditation practice, now we have a lot of guided meditation practices on apps like Calm. I like that app. Some people like Headspace. So those are practices where you focus on listening to someone's voice and they sort of lead you through a meditation where you're encouraged to connect to the moment. You can also do self-directed meditation practices, like a formal practice, like I said before, a transcendental meditation practice where there's a mantra. What is a mantra? A mantra is a word or phrase that you use as your anchoring point. So I'll suggest to clients, like maybe you want to use I'm safe as an anchoring point, or I'm okay, or it's okay. And for a transcendental meditation, what you would do is you would set a timer, maybe on your phone, and you would sit and you would repeat the word or phrase to yourself. Every time your mind starts to wander, you continue to bring it back to the word or phrase in the here and now that you're repeating silently in your head to yourself. And again, the point is not that you won't think. I've had so many clients and friends that will say to me, like, Erin, like, I can't stop thinking. I'm like, that's not a problem. It's not a problem. We're not trying to suppress your thought. We're just trying to get you to keep refocusing and refocusing. When you did that meditation with me before, the auditory meditation, it's likely that you had a thought pop up. Maybe you're like, I'm kind of hungry, or when is this going to be over? Or this is weird, or I like this. That's fine. But the idea is you continue to bring the focus back to the present moment. And like lifting weight, the more you practice these meditations, the stronger you become, the easier it is to default to awakened awareness states. And then we have mindfulness practices. Mindfulness practices are really what I like to call meditation in motion. So there are things you can do, and listen, you can do anything mindfully, but it's essentially being involved in one thing at a time and focusing on a sensation. So you can mindfully cook. You could just be focused on the sensations of chopping, let's say like a pepper, or the smells or the aroma that is coming from cooking. Or when you're washing dishes, just focusing on how it feels on your hands. And every time your mind wanders, let me refocus to how it feels to wash my hands. I think one of the easiest mindfulness practices is mindful walking. This has been a really supportive practice in my life. And I shared this with you in the embracing video when I was talking about how we can embrace difficult emotions and how we can do that in motion, and how I will oftentimes do that while I'm walking. But I find walking to be a really, really great mindfulness practice because it sort of takes your head out of it. And there's so much sensory stimuli. So for me, I will oftentimes focus on the sensation of touch. So it's, what does it feel like to have the breeze brush against my skin? Can I focus on the sensation of my foot rising and falling on a dirt trail? What does that feel like to have my hips moving, right? I'll focus on how it feels to be in motion. So any sort of exercise can be a mindfulness practice. I will say really intense exercise, it's kind of like you're swimming upstream trying to make it a mindfulness practice. I gotta be honest, I think it's harder to do it that way. Unless you're lifting, I would say like heavy weights and you're doing it slowly and you're just focusing on like muscle contractions without music. I would say more moderate to light exercise. It's a little bit easier to focus on sensation and just doing the thing. Swimming is a really great one because usually people don't listen to music while they're swimming and they just have to focus on their strokes. So swimming can be a really great mindfulness practice. But mindful movement is a really, really great way to leverage these and activate these awakened awareness pathways. Also, being connected with other people. So I talk about co-regulation in other videos, which is how we can actually tune up each other's nervous system by being present through our mirror neurons, which allows us to take in what other people are sort of putting out with regards to energy. So just being present with someone, being in a moment, like I said before, I use the example of like watching your kids play. If you're just watching and you're not thinking like, oh my goodness, I need to call their teacher about this or have an IEP meeting, right? If you just allow yourself to watch, that is a mindfulness practice, okay? That's using sight to allow you to ground to the moment. So being with other people, being present with others, also to playing. I'm going to talk about play with regards to developing confidence in higher self, and to really, like, how do we start toggling? You know, like right now I'm really talking about evening the scale. So these practices are really about like how do we get awakened awareness online? Because usually this is like kind of offline in our culture. And so these practices really bolster that. And then I'm going to talk about how do we start to play with that toggle and trust ourselves to be able to do that. So play, immersive play, spontaneous play, not necessarily directed play. Like I said, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but spontaneous play. In Julie Cameron's book, The Artist Way, she talks about people having an artist state. And I love this. And I will usually, when I'm trying to kind of fill people's toolbox on the awakened awareness side of the brain, I will oftentimes encourage them to take an artist state, which is do something fun for yourself, by yourself, whatever that is. Like maybe it's literally go to the zoo by yourself. Do something where you feel like you're going to be immersed in a playful experience, something new, maybe something novel. You know, there's a reason why we feel good when we're on vacation. It's not just because we're off from work and we're in a beautiful place. It's also because the cues, our normal everyday events cue up our achievement awareness pathways, right? Like I go downstairs, I make coffee, I think about all the things I need to do. When you are in a new location, when you're doing something new, you're sort of free of that imprinting or that sort of habitual default mode where your brain normally goes. So it allows you to be more present. So how do we take mental vacations during the week? Like what are some ways we can switch it up? You know, I will say one of the biggest things, that I'm still working on this because I am definitely someone who can fall victim to hustle culture, and I have some perfectionistic traits that like I'm constantly trying to, okay, like how do I open more to life, you know, and have more fun. But I'm always trying to ask myself, so how do I microdose my play? Just like I might microdose, you know, caffeine for more energy. Like how do I microdose play? What are the little things I can do each day to make this day fresh? Right. And maybe that's like, I'm going to go home and watch a stand-up show tonight, or like, I'm going to go take a walk somewhere new, or I'm going to explore this new town, or whatever it is. Right. And again, depending on your time frame and depending on your schedule, sometimes like we microdose play in the smallest of ways. Right. And we microdose these present moment awareness practices in the smallest of ways. That's okay. But I think it's good to develop a toolbox that we can sort of, you know, sift and sort from and say like, okay, today, like, what do I think is going to help me to cultivate and to sort of even out the scale here when it comes to my brain functioning and accessing higher level thinking. So we have our present moment awareness practices, and now I'm going to talk about developing confidence in our ability to toggle. So this confidence, like I said, it becomes easier to have confidence in higher self if we've got the awakened awareness online. Okay, if we've got these practices going on, we feel like we can regulate our emotions better, we feel more open and receptive to life, then toggling back and forth becomes more possible. So some ways that we develop confidence in higher level thinking or in these questing awareness states is through directed play. So play where requires us to be present in the moment, and also to assert our will control over a situation. So here are some thoughts about this. Anything creative is wonderful when it comes to developing confidence in this questing awareness state. When we are involved in a creative pursuit, whatever that is, what we are affirming to ourselves, because I say this to clients all the time, and I think I've said this in videos before, we are always affirming a storyline. You are always affirming to yourself, whether it is you're affirming possibility, like life is full of possibility, like I am possible, like I am a co-creative, agent in my own life, or I'm not. Right? But creative practices, unconsciously, what they are affirming to us when we participate in them is I can create something from nothing that is a really powerful affirmation. When you create a beautiful poem, or when you are crafting or you're collaging and you make something really cool, whatever it is, whatever the creative pursuit is, you might be like a comedian and you crafted this like amazing sort of, improv joke. Whatever it is, when we create something from nothing, we are affirming possibility. We are affirming that questing awareness. We're affirming the fact that we have creative control in our life story. And that's really powerful. So the more you can involve yourself in creative pursuits, the better. Okay, so I oftentimes tell clients, just like with our play practices, with those awakened awareness practices, your play is not a luxury. Okay, so whether it's those practices or some of these practices I'm going to give you today, and again, your preferences are your preferences. I'm not saying you need to love all of these or participate in all of them. But your play is not a luxury. Your present moment awareness practices are also not luxuries. They are necessities. They're necessities to being confident in ourselves. They're necessities in creating greater confidence in life, in our ability to co-create with life, and to solve our problems. So you need these things, and all of these things are going to regulate your nervous system. So when you're on that quest to find the answer, it becomes easier to calm yourself to receive those answers in the moment. And we'll talk about that in future videos, like how do we really open and again direct higher self when we're in positions where we really need it. But for now, like these are really your maintenance practices. This makes it easier. We're strengthening the muscle so that we're able to lift the weight, okay, when we need it. So play practices, anything creative. I talked earlier about Julie Cameron and the Art Estate. Julie Cameron has this amazing practice called morning pages. They're essentially meditation journaling practice where you sit and you don't lift your pen for 3 pages. I love this practice. What ends up happening is you end up talking about nothing for like 2 pages, and most of it's like, I don't know what else to say, or you start complaining about the same things that have been problems for a while. And then usually what I found happens is when you do this for a time, you randomly have these insights. It's like you're doing this directed practice, your achievement awareness is online where you're like, okay, I'm doing, but you sort of lull yourself into a state of presence and you naturally start to toggle and you get really, really sort of beautiful insights. So I'm a huge proponent of that as a practice. So meditation journaling, again, anything creative, and also sports and movement. I talked about mindful movement before. Sports and physical activity is a great way, and it's why it's so great for kids, for so many reasons. This is the developmental task of children, is play. And I believe it's because we need play, as we saw with the achievement awareness activities and also with developing confidence in higher self with these activities. We need play. As adults, and it's our home base. All these practices I'm giving you are your home base practices to come back to yourself. Okay, so it's why I think it's such an important thing for us to learn as children and to feel comfortable defaulting to. So with that in mind, I also want to say, as I'm talking about some of these practices, I understand that developing a toolbox of these practices can be difficult for some people because, especially for my parentified children out there. So if you grew up in a family where you were really heavily burdened with caregiver responsibilities, or you tend to be very hyper responsible, or you have perfectionistic traits, you might need some help coming up with ideas. I'm giving you ideas, but what I would encourage you to do is to share this video with friends and family, see what they're doing to remain connected to the present moment and to also engage themselves with directed forms of play, what I'm talking about right now, where we're really trying to simulate that toggle. And see if you can't try to join them in their pursuit of this. Sometimes we need some feedback and some help, so I want to kind of normalize that for a moment. And the final idea I'm going to give you has to do with erotic play. So we as adults, what we call in the therapeutic world, adult play is sex. Now in our culture, a lot of times sex is really outcome driven. We don't have the time to actually get into our bodies. And because we have such, like body image issues are so pervasive, all over, sometimes it's really hard to be present in these sexual activities, and for them to really be playful. Also, too, if you've been with someone for a long time, a partner with a long time, sometimes there is stagnancy, or we stop playing with each other, right? You kind of default to old behaviors or old habits. So I had suggested Jaiya May's erotic blueprint model in my heroic relationship video. In it, she has different sort of, it's like love languages for your eroticism, so for your arousal. I think this is a great resource for couples to start playing with one another, or partners, I should say. Maybe you're not in a couple. For partners to start playing with themselves and each other in new ways, and in ways that aren't necessarily outcome driven. In tantric tradition, there are two practices: lingam massage and yoni massage. So this is essentially massage for penis and vagina. And these massages are not meant to bring partners to arousal. They're more intended to allow them to connect to their body sensations, because we're so disconnected and disassociated from our body sensations when we're in achievement awareness states all of the time. And we need to get things done. Okay, so what I would encourage you to just have this sort of, I'm encouraging sort of a frame shift here when it comes to sex, to start to think about sex in terms of like, how can I try to play here again? And can I try to use this as both a mindfulness practice and a playful pursuit? So can we try to, again, facilitate that toggle between being present to sensation, what am I feeling, and present to this co-creative process of dancing together sexually, okay? But I think that this is a great erotic play is a great way to simulate that toggle, because you also have help with it. And as I said, again, with other videos and in this videos, our ability to co-regulate each other's nervous system, to have help with being present, is also an added benefit of leveraging erotic play in our, as a tool for entering into questing awareness states or flow states, and developing confidence in higher self. So in summary, I hope this video was helpful. I want to say to you, the goal of some of these practices are not to get into these flow states all of the time or have these peak experiences all of the time, but it's really to start flexing that muscle like we would do with working out or anything else, so that it becomes stronger, so that we're able to balance the scales, and we're able to balance sort of our brain scale, right? And we're able to access higher level of self when we need it more readily and easily. So I hope you give some of these practices a try. I hope you have some conversations with loved ones about maybe how you can support one another in microdosing your play, in trying new forms of play or present moment awareness practices. And you can start small. Small investments over time make a difference, like any sort of investment. Okay, so I really wish you well in implementing these, and I look forward to the next series of videos where we'll talk about opening up to higher self.